And welcome to the Intuitive Entrepreneur Show, where we bring enlightened entrepreneurs, coaches, and influencers together to discuss cutting-edge topics for the world of relationships, culture, business, and spirituality. Here's your host, Max Anjanetta Jones.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Carol's Courage to Confidence segment of the Intuitive Entrepreneur Show. Now, you know what I always say. We call it Courage to Confidence because if you've got a little bit of courage, and I know you do, and you hire a good coach like me or one of the other coaches I bring on board, we're going to very quickly get you from where you are to where you want to go. Now, you know I'm your weather girl too. So whether you're going to chime in live, you got to tell us what the weather's like, where you're chiming in from. And if it's on replay, let us know, #replay. I am so excited about who our guest is today, and I'm going to try really hard to pronounce her name correctly. Anuradha. Sweet. I got it. I'm really excited. She is coming to us live from London, and they've had pretty good weather there today. So I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to in the world right now.
Yeah, thank you. Yay for getting the name right. I appreciate that. My company is called the Kowtha Constellation. I've been working in it. I've been owned it for about 10 years now, which seems like a very long time. I came over here, actually, we were talking before the show. I was born and raised in Phoenix. I lived in New Mexico where I was a teacher. I did research. I did a number of things. But when I came here, I have been working primarily on continuing that quest of figuring out how the indoctrination of capitalism and colonialism impact us, how they shape the way we think, the way we show up in the world, and how we can undo that, especially in the sense of business or nonprofits. And how can we do more equitable ways of doing business?
I think we need you back over here in the United States.
We have our own problems over here in the UK as well. It feels like a global situation, a crisis of confidence around that for sure.
Isn't that, it is amazing. We do get indoctrinated even from a very, very young age. And the thing is we don't know it, right? Because up until the age of, is it 5 or 7, our brains are like sponges. We just take in everything that's given to us. And oftentimes we internalize it. So I applaud you for what you're doing in the world. I would not be able to do what you're doing in the world. So there's something great for everybody. And I want to tell you real quick, we were supposed to have another guest as well. And when I looked at the background of that guest and I looked at your background, I started cracking up because let me tell you a quick story. Back in May of, whenever COVID started, 2019, 20, when was it, 20? Whenever it was.
2020, yeah, 2020, yeah.
20, there we go. So almost 3 years ago. So I had been building my business completely offline. I didn't want to be on Facebook. I didn't want to do all this stuff. All of a sudden COVID hits and bam, I got to try to figure out how to do things online. So I don't remember exactly how I met Max, and that's the lady who owns this whole thing. But we got on a Zoom one day and we're chatting and she leans in and she says, "You know why you don't have very many clients right now, Carol?" I said, "I didn't tell you that I don't have very many clients right now." And she goes, "Oh, didn't I tell you I'm clairvoyant?" I thought, what? She goes, she's all the voyants, audio voyant, all these things, right? So I'm thinking, this is a little woo-woo for me. Mm-hmm. And she said, the reason is because you're going to have different clients going forward in the future, and you're going to get to let go of those ones in the past. So I thought, okay. A few weeks goes by, maybe 2-3 months, and we have another conversation. And she says to me, now, I didn't prompt this. She says to me, "Now, Carol, you're really going to have to give up that love of doing just one-on-one coaching." And I said, "I didn't tell you that's all I did." She rolls her eyes at me and she goes, "Carol, didn't I tell you I'm clairvoyant?" Mm-hmm. And she said, "You're going to be on big stages and in front of big crowds." Now, the reason I'm telling you that is because you fit right in here. And so did our other lady that was supposed to be here. So I literally printed out what you sent in and I had to go do some research, which is good. I'm the pragmatic, and most of the people that come on this show do what? They bring the woo-woo, but you also bring pragmatic as well, which I like. So I got an education today. If you're open to discussing it, you put it in here. If you're not, just say so. I didn't know what neurodivergent meant. Yeah. And so I literally went and Googled it. Is that something you're open to discussing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need more conversations around neurodiversity in general. Yes. What do you want to know?
Well, I looked it up, and I'm not going to say I totally understand it. It did. It when I googled it, it said that autism, Asperger's, and something else are all considered neurodivergent challenges. It said something about there's a different balance in the brain. I don't know. I'd like you
So,
to kind of explain
okay,
it in layman's
yeah, of course. Yeah, I have a background as an educator, as I mentioned earlier. So let me explain it in a way. So neurodiversity is the sum total, like all the people in the world. We have different ways of making meaning, of understanding our thought process. How do we communicate? How is our brain wired? And so neurodiversity is that whole spectrum. It is not just, so a lot of people tend to think, oh, it's ADHD and it's autism, and that's it. And there's
Mm.
certain reasons we don't want to use the term Asperger's because of the correlation to Nazism and the low functioning versus high functioning, which can be
Wait.
a
I've never heard that. Nazism?
Well, because that's where that's where he was from, and then they were using that as a scale to decide who would live or die. So it's a way to weed out, these are high functioning neurodivergent people, so they can live, and then these other
Oh,
people we're going to not have around anymore. We're going to kill them. So that's why I kind of think there's a distinguishing terms. We want to be careful with that, but
thank
the
you.
whole umbrella of neurodiversity, and here I'm info dumping here for those who are in the know. I'm going to info dump you've hit on an info dump subject. You've handed me the mic. I love it. So some of the ways that we might be neurodivergent would be, so obviously ADHD and autism, those are the most common and most well known, but we can also have dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, which are different types of learning disabilities, which are the way we actually take in information or process information. We can also have mood disorders like depression or anxiety. They can change the way our brain is wired,
Mm.
that it's different than a neurotypical person's brain is wired. Trauma can also, or bipolar disorder and so on. Those are all types of neurodiversity in the way we're taking in the world, we're making meaning in the way we're explaining or processing and sharing, communicating. So in the classroom, even without people having a diagnosis, it's really good, important information for us to know. How do we learn? How do we make meaning? How are we making decisions? And that is the beauty of this neurodivergent umbrella, to understand where we fall.
Mm.
And there is a wide range of ways we can be processing and sharing. And I think in the best circumstances, we make space for that. So right now, our world is set up for very neurotypical living. So meaning if I go, I have complex trauma. I am
Okay.
probably ADHD, and I believe self-diagnosis is okay, but I'm in a waiting list, an NHS waiting list to get tested,
May
you
I
know?
ask a quick question? Um,
Yes.
you said neurotypical. Is
Yes.
there really a typical? Is there really a norm? Like, have they studied and they said like this is the baseline and this is how we base everything off of that?
I have not seen any studies that indicate that, but I
Okay.
have seen the way we have used that to kind of make everyone fall in line, like that indoctrination pattern. We are all right. So if we think about this, the way that in our world, if you wake up early, that is considered a virtue. But the people who are night owls, who work late, who like to be up late at night, they're not given the same value. Or people who show up to meetings on time and are punctual, those people are valued. But the people who don't, who are maybe kind of a little bit more what we call time blind, they can't see time in the same way, they are penalized in our culture. So we see these kinds of hallmarks of how certain people
Mm.
are given leeway to show up as they are, and the people who need the extra support and guidance to make that happen, or certain accommodations, they are seen as a drag. They are seen as they can't get their act together. They're put down in some way, right? How do we look at depressive people in movies? Oh, they're, you know, we have certain tropes about how we look at them, how we view them. And it's often very harmful, because these individuals are probably trying just as hard, if not harder, to fit into a society that doesn't especially in a workplace or a business place. And we're in a business podcast. One of the things is most people who own businesses, high statistics of business owners who probably are neurodivergent in some way, shape, or form. So we're more likely that we couldn't fit in corporate world or in the regular world, and now we've had to carve our own path, so to speak. So it happens more frequently than we think.
That's fascinating, because I'm one of the things I'm known for is being a reluctant entrepreneur. I loved corporate America. I'm a phenomenal employee, and I realize that's why I've been challenged to grow my business. But also, it's interesting me taking all this in, because I have battled depression for decades, right? I'm on medication and all that kind of stuff, and I did therapy for years. So I'm doing great. But back in August, I was asked to give a keynote talk, and it was at a big gala, and it was called Unmasking Mental Health. And the lady who put it on, she's amazing, Dr. Tenney. Her organization, the Healing Arts Institute, going to give her a plug, because she gives free mental health care services to anybody up to the age of 22, and then she has a sliding scale after that. So in my eyes, she's doing a lot of good in the world. But what was interesting was how people perceive me. All the people that don't know that I've ever battled depression, because I'm the shake your hand, give you a hug girl. I come in and I'm not the thermometer. I'm the thermostat in the room.
Mm-hmm.
I'm upbeat. They call me the mayor. I love to work a room. But as I went into my talk and tied in part of my story, and I brought in leadership and Be, Do, Have, and empowering questions that I teach and train on, absolutely fascinating, the response. And one of the things for me, and I help my clients learn this, is that other people's judgments of you, right, are not about you. It's about them. And I think if we could all really learn that and not internalize that, it might cause less harm. That's my thought. What do you think about that?
I think that's certainly a good place to start. But not everyone who has mood disorders or other neurodivergent things are able to have that kind of thought process regularly without support or medication. So that's one thing.
Okay.
And I think the other piece is we always, and this is one of the hallmarks of how capitalism operates, is it's always trying to commodify and sell us back a solution on a personal level. So it's not the top 100 big companies, including the US military, that are causing pollution. No, like they might be the top polluters, but it's you not using a reusable straw that is the problem. That is the way it is framed. And BP, British Petroleum, did a good job in marketing that. They're the one who started that specific trope. So once again, we put the onus back on the people who are the most historically marginalized, who are the least, have the least resources, because we still have laws in the UK and the US that people with disabilities can be paid as little as £1 an hour. $1 an hour in some circumstances. It is true in many states, in the UK as well. If you are permanently disabled and you have a carer and so on, you can go to a job and they can pay you as little as £1 an hour. And this is really true. So these people with the least supplies, least support, shouldn't be the ones who also have to shoulder the burden of reframing. I'm not saying reframing and taking personal responsibility has no place, but I'm saying often the work that is the harder piece is holding people accountable in terms of the people with more systemic power and collective responsibility, shifting that responsibility off the weight of the most historically marginalized. So I see it in a wider context, I guess what I'm saying.
No, that's good. Listen, I'm getting all kind of education here. This is awesome.
Okay.
It would be boring if I knew everything. I've told you, I went and looked their stuff up. I'm like, this is awesome. I get an education today. So when you're looking at the capitalism and everything, do you consider yourself a politician? Do you consider yourself an analyzer of politics? How do you look at that?
I am not a politician. I am not born to be a politician. I don't think I have thick enough skin to be doing that work in that way. But I have I want people, so I consider myself a liberation strategist. So most of my work is going into small businesses and organizations or doing online trainings and courses that shift people's mindset about how do we look at capitalism? How do we start to take back our power and do other things? What are practical things we can be doing around creating our own personal and collective praxis to change the narrative that we're currently being dealt with? Because right now we're living through late stage capitalism, and it is kind of uncomfortable. I mean, to say the least, it is quite galling of what's happening right now. And we need to be shifting the narrative. So I feel like I embody the strategic pieces, the storytelling pieces, the weaving the new narratives, and helping people create the resources and skills so that we can face these challenges.
So you said small businesses is one of your target audience. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's right.
So how do you find your ideal client? Like, do they hear what you're doing and they approach you and they say, yeah, I want you to bring this into my company? Or do you go out and say, hey, this is what's going on? How do you work that?
I think it's a combination. Sometimes I do get word of mouth referrals or people specifically reaching out to me to apply or to share something. So that certainly happened. But then the other piece is I'm looking for open calls for interest in organizations where they do have DEI funding or other similar types of funding available, and they're looking for specific support. I write proposals and so on to meet their needs in those ways as well.
Well, there's certainly a huge need for that, right? It's incredible,
Yes.
Incredible. What is the one thing, this is going to be hard for you. What is the one thing, if you only could do one thing you would change about capitalism that would improve the world? I know there's a lot, but I want you
There's
to
a
tell me
lot. There's just
tell me what's
one
closest.
thing.
Tell me what's closest to your heart. Tell me the one thing.
There's so many things in my heart, but I think right now, based on my feelings at this moment and incidents that have happened this week or even just a few minutes before this broadcast, I really want people in the global north, so this is all of us who are benefiting in some way from labor, from materials, from food produced in the global south, minerals, like what's in our cell phones, what's in our cameras, what's in our batteries. These are all things mined and exploited from the global south. And we maybe sometimes stick a label on it saying, oh, it's fair trade. Like we just had fair trade fortnight here in the UK. But we are grossly underpaying those in the global south for their resources, for their time. And we're extracting from them in terms of labor, in terms of who is doing the work, in terms of those natural resources. And to me, if we could stop that dynamic of predation on the global south, that would be a huge step towards not only equity, but we would also be able to hold countries in the global north, specifically Western Europe and United States and Australia, accountable for the climate damage and the climate destruction that is mostly being impacting the global south more than us in the global north. So that's the biggest thing I would change.
And you just kind of took away my next question, because I was going to tell you, I'm ignorant on who the global south is. And then you said who the global north was, right? The US, Australia, and Western Europe. So I would not have known that.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to me long enough, you'll know I am completely non-political.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 90s, I went to work for AT&T. I was in sales. I was a sales expert for 26 years for large Fortune 100 companies. So I have a new boss, and he was Cuban. And he just had his name tag in front of his desk. Now, nobody introduced me when I walked in, right? And so I said, I called him, Mario Bacalao. It looked like Mario Bacalao, right? And all these people kept going, Carol. I said, what? They said, you just called him a codfish. And everybody starts cracking up, and he starts cracking up. I didn't know it was bacalhau, right?
Mm.
So why am I telling you that? Because he was extremely political and he could never engage me. It didn't matter how he tried to goad me, what he said, he could not engage me in a political conversation. And I said to him, I am apolitical. I don't get involved. And he kept insisting that that meant I was taking a political stand. In his eyes, I was still taking a political stand.
I would agree with his statement.
Yeah. But it's been what, 30 years and I haven't changed, right? I just don't get involved. I vote. I pay attention enough to vote. But for example, I have a friend, a good friend, and she and her husband are big Trumpers. And back when the election was going on, she was ranting and raving one day, and she knows she cannot get me involved in a conversation, but I don't ever tell her I don't say anything. I just let her vent. But one day I looked at her and I said, Cindy, aren't you on blood pressure medication? And she said, yes. I said, you got to let some of this go. Like, go vote. That's what you can do. Are you the one that gets involved? Like, would you go on a march? Would you take a stand? Are you one of those that love to do that as well?
I have done in the past in some of the rallies in New Mexico or even here in London for some of the anti-austerity protests or the anti-Brexit protests. I certainly was out there, but I wouldn't say that's my primary way of engaging in the world as someone who's neurodivergent and has disabilities and so on. That frontline work is not really my place. When I was younger and healthier and perhaps before I had, child and those kinds of responsibilities, that has shifted for me. And I would say teaching is probably frontline work because we have to be taking
Yes.
care of our students constantly. So I did that for many years and I still teach, but I don't teach in public schools anymore. I teach at high school level. I teach mostly adults in online education or in-person trainings. So that's still but I think my work, as I mentioned earlier, is the storytelling is changing hearts and minds through the work, through our perspective. And that's what I can do. I don't think voting as a mechanism is necessarily the best thing to do or the only thing to do. It is a thing to do, but it's becoming because part of what capitalism does is it has to make things unfair. And so we do have voting disenfranchisement, right? In the UK, up until this election year, we haven't ever had to have IDs for voting. But now that is becoming law, and that's going to disenfranchise the people who are going to vote for fairer society and change more than people who are rich and wealthy. So they could wealthy people can access a passport or other documentation at a polling station. Poorer people can't, or people who are people of color often.
I know here, because I was researching this just the other day.
Yep.
Homeless people, for example, here in South Florida, in Broward County anyway, you don't actually have to even be living in the homeless shelter, but there are homeless shelters here that will advocate for you and make sure that you get a state of Florida ID.
Okay.
Doesn't matter if you have money or not. Do they have that over in the UK as well?
I don't know all the programs here, and all these things are going to be very local specific. And that's why I think even if we're interested in national or international politics in any way, because they do impact us regardless, right? But the people, we do need to have our say, but I think the best places to get involved in those kinds of projects are at grassroots local level. And so, there's different measures across London that I'm aware of that have different kinds of programs to support those who are homeless or so on in different ways.
So one of the things I'm interested in, because I'm a storyteller too. Obviously, we tell different stories. So we have a few more minutes. So we have about 5 minutes left. Do you have a story that maybe you share often that has a huge impact? You can tell us in a couple of minutes.
Oh, goodness. A story that I can tell in a couple minutes. About what? Can you help me narrow it down? Because I know too many stories.
Well, I feel your passion. I think it's awesome. Like, what's a story that perhaps, let's say that I was your client and I have my employees here, and you're going to tell us a story to make us a big impact so that we understand what you're trying to do in the world. Do you have a short story around that?
Well, I think if I was working with an organization like yours, pretend like having a stance of apoliticalness is dangerous in times like this. So I don't know if I have
Oh,
a
no, no.
story.
I might not, I'm not saying my company. Let's just say you're at a company in the UK
Yeah.
and
But
they've
I
hired
would,
you.
yeah, but I would be thinking of like Howard Zinn, who's written many books, even a retelling of US history through the lenses of the indigenous and so on. Like he's really like it's one of a really important book that we're not covering in US history as children. We're learning about history, but we're learning from a very colonialized view of what
Mm,
happened.
yep.
And so one of his books, and he has a quote that says, "We can't be standing still on a moving train." And so we're on a moving
Mm,
train right now, and our lack of speaking up is causing a lot of damage. So when we see these kinds of conversations, when I see people who are like allowing fascist ideas to be blossoming in their spaces and they're not speaking up about it, who is it hurting? It's literally hurting people who have the least privilege in our society, and they don't have the same funds or access to resources to write that. And oftentimes, like if we're looking at trans rights right now, there are over 300 US laws across the country being either passed or in process of being passed in many state legislatures that are gutting rights for people. And what people don't understand about this is cis women in particular. They are going through cis women's rights and to attack trans women. And every time we, as you know, every time we are not standing up in solidarity with our trans and non-binary siblings, we are allowing that narrative of, here in the UK, they're using terms like protect biological sex or safe sex, same sex spaces, but they're ignoring the part that trans women are women and it's not some costume they're putting on. So they continue to misgender them and so on. So they're using all sorts of dehumanization tactics, and we need to
mm.
learn to see through those dehumanization tactics. It's not the same, right? There's often a false equivalency that we see in this work that, you know, calling someone a TERF is not the same as dehumanizing them and dehumanizing a trans person. They're not of equal weight. One is actually saying, we don't want you to live on this planet. We want to murder you, execute you in some way, because that's what if there's no place they can live and survive, if they're going to be outed as a drag queen or a trans person, they can be murdered. That's kind of what the rhetoric is showing, versus getting your feelings hurt as being called a TERF. They're not the same weight. So this is what
I
we
don't know what
happen
a
when,
turf is. I'm sorry. I don't know what a
oh,
turf
sorry,
is.
trans exclusionary radical feminist. And
Thank
so
you.
these are the people who don't think trans women are women. They think trans
Oh,
women are in men's costumes. So this is, so they're wearing the costume of womanhood. So we really need to dig below that surface. How do we define womanhood based on inclusive definitions? So this is one example of how it gets into our rhetoric, and we need to push back against such language.
I'm sorry this show's almost over because I'm learning so much. This is awesome. We're just getting started, but we only have a minute or so left. And we're going to run your contact information across the screen now.
Yeah.
Tell people how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah.
People that you'd
Yeah.
like to work with. Yeah. Tell them.
Yeah, that would be great. My website is thekothaconstellation.com, and I'm on either at Anuradha Kowtha or at the Kotha Constellation on most social media platforms. And I'd love to get in conversation and talk more about this with anyone who's ready to do this work in their organization.
Fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here today. And if you're watching this on hashtag replay, let us know that you're watching this on replay. Reach out, get involved. I know that there's a lot of people in this community that have a lot to say and that are willing to do something. So one of the things I'm hearing from you is that oftentimes people aren't speaking up because of either fear. Some people are afraid. And for me, it would be lack of education. So I thank you for the education today. And I have now stuff that I can go look up and continue to be educated and grow. So I support you in what you're doing. And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. You know, this has been Carol's Courage to Confidence segment of the Intuitive Entrepreneur Show. We're here every Wednesday. We've got new guests. If you want to be a guest, make sure you go on and sign up. Let's get you some exposure. Let's get your voice heard, just like we did today. And let's make a difference in the world. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next Wednesday.
The Intuitive Entrepreneur Show is hosted by Max and Janetta Jones and is brought to you by Life Coaching Today magazine, empowering your health, business, community, and life. This has been a production of True Awesome Life Productions, who asks, what does your true awesome life look like? Start that journey today at trueawesomelife.com. For more information on this or past episodes,